I Love Mortgage Brokering, Episode 4.
Want to rock your mortgage business? Then crank up the volume with your host, Scott Peckford, on I Love Mortgage Brokering.
Hi, Broker Nation. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today, Denis Brunet. Denis is a mortgage broker with Mortgage Architects based out of Winnipeg. He has been a mortgage broker for about 23 years and is one of the most successful brokers in the country. Actually, to get on I Love Mortgage Brokering, you have to be killing it. And I'm stoked about this interview. Hi, Denis, are you ready to rock?
We're ready to rock.
Awesome. So the first question I want to ask is just tell us a little bit about yourself and about your business.
Okay, well, I started in the lending side back in February of '89, and then in November of '93, I ended up jumping into the broker side. I had been offered, it was the downsizing of the trust companies, and what had happened was I was offered a couple of jobs with a couple of different lenders. At the time, Winnipeg only had maybe 2 or 3 brokers in town, and that was the basis of where we were generating our leads on the trust company side. And I said, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot, because if these guys are making money doing it, I should be able to do just as good as they should, because I'm probably a little bit better of a person than they are.
That's awesome.
So I took off. so I ended up taking off with that, and I started working out of the basement of my house. Then I worked with another company doing some of the private stuff. Formed a partnership with somebody, and then in '96, like a bad divorce, that didn't work out, but ended up going individual, and I've been working individual ever since.
And so how long have you had your own company?
For lack of a better term, since October of '96.
And then just to get a snapshot of sort of where you're coming from, can you just tell us like sort of how many sub-brokers and assistants or licensed assistants you have at your office, just to get an idea of what that looks like?
In Manitoba, as far as licensed assistants go, we don't necessarily need to have them as licensed unless they're going to talk about mortgage documentation. Mm-hmm. I used to have somebody who would fall underneath the category of a salesperson who I had as a right-hand person, and then she ended up going out on her own to become her own individual broker. I've got one assistant right now who processes not only my paperwork, but the work for the office. And with that, we've also got 6 additional brokers here in my office, and we're looking to add on another 2 to 3 over the course of the next couple of months.
Awesome. So then things are growing for you guys right now.
Things are growing. We've got a good value proposition with Mortgage Architects, so that helps. And when people start to see that and what it is we're doing in the market, and how it is that we're marketing, and of course the good reputation that we've got, we find that there's more and more attraction and more questions that are starting to come our way and asking why Mortgage Architects, why should I work with Denis versus Joe Blow down the street.
Right, and the last question on your business practice or your mortgage practice. So what would you say your split of A versus B is? That's been a varying split, because what's happened over the course of the last few years with all the mortgage changes that have come to play and the limited amount of private lenders that we've got over here, we used to be probably 75% A and 25% B, and that would be primarily residential. But over the course of the last couple of years, we're starting to see that going more so towards about a 50-50 split right now. And we're starting to see more commercial rather than residential, because with all those rule changes that have come into play, we're starting to find that it's getting to be a little bit more difficult to place in more of the A deals, and the B lenders are starting to get a little bit more fuzzy and knowing what it is that what they tell you on the front side versus what they'll do on the back side. And then plus we've lucked into having a couple of different lending entities on the private side that are working with us that are the true gut feel kind of lenders that I first came into this market with back in 1989. So it sure makes a difference when we're dealing with lenders and borrowers, explaining to them how processes work. And if they trust you on that, that's going to go so far down the road. And then that's why we're starting to see more and more of the B business growing for us. Yeah, it seems to me that change brings opportunity if you seize it, and it sounds like you guys are doing that. And so the next question I'd like to ask is, I love quotes. I love how they condense a thought or a concept into something a bite size that you can take. So do you have a favorite quote that has impacted your life or business?
It's kind of funny. I got one of these little tent cards that I bought probably about 20 years ago, right when I first started, and it has a slogan on it, and I still have it in front of me, and it says, winners never quit and quitters never win.
That's good. That's
there's
good.
so much truth that goes with it.
So can you give me an example of when you've applied that to your mortgage practice? Like a specific example of something where you applied it.
Outside of it's easier for me to explain it outside of the mortgage business because this is something that happened to us just the other day inside of our personal life. We've got 3 kids, and our oldest one is 22 years old, and she's going through a little bit of a rough time as far as the employment goes. She was working for a company that all of a sudden out of the blue closed doors. Then she said, well, maybe I'd like to try working in a travel agency. She tried that, and as much as she enjoyed working as a travel agent, her employer wasn't working good for her, and then she was really down in the dumps. And I said, you know what? And she kept on telling us that she didn't want to be into the retail side. She didn't want to be a salesperson. The good thing, or we sat her down and we said, you know what? You have to understand something. You're a very attractive person. You're a very smart person, and you've got looks and skills and communication that is one of the key things that's going to get you to the next level for no matter what it is that you want to accomplish in life. And she was, like I said, she was down in the dumps, not really sure what to do, very depressed, hiding in a room all the time. And we just said, you know, you got to be able to get out and go out and do this. So we really sat her down and we made a little bit of a plan and said, okay, so here's what you're going to do day by day, by day by day, and just follow the process. And we showed her how it is that if you do something consistently day in, day out, it becomes habit. And then once it becomes habit, it becomes first nature. And once it becomes first nature, it's a natural. And that's going to just bring you right back to the start where if you keep on going and you don't quit, you're going to always come out further ahead of the game. And that's really had a major impact in her to the point where yesterday she said, you know what, I really have to thank you guys because what you said 3 months ago has really panned out to be true, and I'm looking forward to where it is that I'm going to be going over the course of the next 3 to 6 months. And she basically jumped into going into a position of working as an educational assistant.
You know, you actually applied that. I know that you said it was a personal example, but you applied the principle of not quitting on your daughter, right? Like you didn't give up on her and say, oh, what's wrong with you? You applied it and said, look, let's come up with a plan. Let's make one baby step and keep moving in the right direction. And it's so true. Like a lot of times in life, people are so close to getting through something, but they stop just right before they get there. And that's a great quote. I love it.
Yeah, and it's always, I find that part of my nature is to go out and try and find a solution. Whereas if you don't try and find that solution, you may as well just throw in the towel and just move on to the next. But the next isn't going to be as easy. It
doesn't get easier often. Once you've kind of quit on something, it gets easier to quit, if anything else, every time that you quit something.
Yes.
So one of the things also that I've found in my business, I've been doing this for 8 years, is that when something goes wrong or I fail at something, there's always a lesson in it. So could you share an example of something that you'd failed at and what you learned from it?
Something that I failed at. I'm not going to say that it was necessarily a failure, but I guess in some light it could be. One of the things that I have a soft side or a soft heart for is being overly trusting with certain individuals, to the point where I don't want to let somebody down, because quite often my word is my bond. One of the things where that ended up costing me, and it literally cost me a friendship as well as a lot of money, and that was we threw an addition onto our cottage back 3 years ago, and they kept on telling me, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. It's not going to cost you that much, not cost you that much. Well, it probably ended up costing me about $20,000 more than what I had hoped for it to cost. And it was a failure in the sense that I should have gone with my gut. I deal with this stuff on a day-to-day basis, and I tell people all the time, you know what, make sure you get something writing. Make sure you get everything broken down so you know what it is that's going to cost you in the long run. And in this particular case, we got the cottage, the rough part of it done in the fall, the completion done in the spring, and all of a sudden I'm being handed a bill here for $45,000, and I was saying, like, are you guys kidding me? What are you talking about? And it was their understanding that this is what it was going to be, and this is how much money we saved you, so this is what it's going to cost you. And at the end, I just said, no, I'm not paying this. If you want to go to court, let's go to court. Let's talk about it some more. And I have not seen or spoken to these people in 2.5 years.
So that was obviously that was with a contract, like a general contractor you were working with.
That's correct. Yeah, it was a husband and wife team that threw an addition onto the cottage, and these are people that I've known for 2 or 3 years already, and they do very, very nice work.
And so, just so we can distill it down for our listeners, so how could you put that into condense it? What's the lesson in it that you've learned from this?
As much as I have a tendency to trust people, always make sure that you get the correct version of what everybody understands in writing, so that there's no miscommunication that takes place. And when it comes time to paying the bill, pay the bill. Because I was paying them all in cash as well.
Mm-hmm. Recently, just as a side, I've taken my kids. I've written contracts for them on different things they want. My one daughter wants an iPod or an iPad, and so I said, okay, you can have one, but there's certain things you need to do, and here's a contract. And she says, well, what's a contract? And I explained it's basically a written promise that we both, so that there's no confusion. And so I agree, it's so easy sometimes but having it in writing keeps all that confusion from happening and relationship intact, right?
Yes, and then there's no miscommunication, or there shouldn't be.
So the other thing I've noticed about successful brokers is they all have a system or process, and they're willing to adjust it or tweak it in order to get better results. Can you share an example of a sales process or a follow-up process or something that you've done, what kind of change you've made, and what kind of outcome you got from it?
When I first started in this business, I was what I call a mortgage junkie or a deal junkie. I had to be involved with it the whole step of the way. The damning thing about doing it in that particular format is you're in it from start to finish, and as you're going along the process, the next one comes in, and you're in it from start to finish. And it takes away from your livelihood, and you start to learn how it is you can work smarter, not harder. As much as it's nice to be able to go out there and say, yeah, I want to be able to satisfy people and put money in my pocket, you still have to have a life outside of that. And it put me in a market where I was becoming a bit of a workaholic, and to some degree I still am today. But I was the deal junkie. I had to have it in my hands and fingers into everything. It came to a point where I needed to have somebody who I was able to trust to be able to hand off my work to and know that it was going to get handled properly and up to my standards. And I had that for the longest time, where I was able to come in and do a lot more volume and have people working for me. So I had, for a period of time, I had a couple of assistants that were working with me, and I didn't have to worry about that. I became the rainmaker, going out, getting the deals and having people there, still having my figures into the deals, but then I lost... I'm down to one assistant now, and when I lost the one who was quite knowledgeable of the business and very customer service oriented, that's where I noticed that I started to become the junkie again. I got to get myself right back into passing along a lot of this information, because people, whenever they phone, because of the work that you've done, phone for you. They're not expecting somebody else to handle it unless you can deliver the proper handoff. And that handoff is that, here, I'm doing this work, and here's the people who are part of my team who are going to be working with me, and expect phone calls from them and communication from them in order to be able to move on to the next step. And that's where I found that as long as you communicate that properly to the next person, then you can at least maintain those renewals and referrals and repeat customers to come in.
So it's all about setting the right expectations and then having some kind of a system that allows you to, I think Tyler, he had called it a conveyor belt. So his business is like a conveyor belt, and the file moves along the conveyor belt. So same kind of thing. But I know, same as me, I have sometimes trouble letting go of that control. And it's so give me a tip on how you finally are able. What's the tip to letting go of your fingers in every deal?
You just have to go with your gut, and you got to trust the person you're passing it on to, realizing that they will make mistakes, and realizing that they will likely learn from that mistake and move on to the next one without having to make that mistake again.
Right. Yeah, that's
letting go is so tough.
It is, and I'm working on it. So
yeah, no, and I hear you. It is really tough to do.
So, what one habit or thing do you think has made you a successful mortgage broker?
Probably the one that's been most dominant in my life is making sure that I tell people where I believe they are at. and letting them know that I only get paid if I fund the mortgage, but it's got to be in their best interest, not my best interest. I don't know about you, but I find that more often than not, people are out there looking to see how much money they can put in their pocket, and it doesn't matter whether it's $100 or $1,000 or $10,000. They take a look to see how much they can put in their pocket without spending the time to educate the consumer. Quite often, I bet you I can count at least one time a week when I'm going to sit down or speak to somebody and let them know that as much as I'd like to be able to get their business, I'm not going to take their business just to line my pockets, because I want to make sure that that they know that I understand and respect the fact that they work hard for their money, and that for every extra dollar that it's going to cost them to break a mortgage or move companies or something like that, it's actually costing them $2 in gross income. So I said, it's just not worth you moving so I can put money in my pocket. Let's make sure you're well taken care of up front and doing things for the right reasons.
Right. So that's sometimes where you're coaching a client that's at another institution that you don't work with, but coaching them on what the best options are for them.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. It does happen to us too. We run into the same thing. So another theme that I've been noticing talking to successful brokers is they need to diversify your income. So to offer more products or services, is there one area that you're having success in, or an area you want to focus on in the next year?
Yeah, and actually it was one that was launched by Mortgage Architects just recently. And this is something that just came naturally because every so often, like I mentioned earlier, I'm always trying to find ways to be able to help people. And every so often, when you're dealing with people who are on the self-employed side or in a business that's in a growth mode, they're always looking for different ways to finance. And when they're looking for that, you have to be able to try and provide, in my opinion, different options for them. You can sit back and say, well, you know what, no, I only deal with mortgages, or, you know what, I know somebody who can help with this particular situation. And recently, Mortgage Architects came out with their factoring of accounts receivable and equipment leasing. And as it turns out, we're on the cusp of getting a deal signed off right now with a restoration company who gets their monies paid to them by insurance companies, but they got to wait 90, 120, 180 days for their money. But in the meantime, they're still putting out all their money up front, and they need to be able to catch up, and the banks aren't helping them. So we're doing an AR financing program with them, which is going to help them out substantially as far as their growth goes, as far as getting additional business. But at the same time, it's going to provide additional funds for me, because every time that they use the service, I'll be getting a check coming into my account. And I just looked at it, all I want to do is help somebody.
Right. And so just for anybody who's listening who doesn't know what AR factoring is, can you explain that?
Account receivable factoring is the easiest way to say it is something like this. Let's say you have an insurance company by the name of Lloyd's of London. And here's an actual example. Lloyd's of London financed a hotel here in Winnipeg that had some water damage, and it sounds like the total insurance coverage that's going to come into play is anywhere between $500,000 and $600,000. Well, the insurance company has to hire a restoration company to go out and do all the work to help replace everything, store everything, and restore everything to bring it back to where the company was before the damage happened. And it's going to take about 3 to 4 months for that to happen. Well, this happened 2 months ago, and the restoration company is going to still be waiting for about another 4 months before they actually get the check from Lloyd's of London to pay them. So they've got a nice big receivable, it's got a good margin in it, and they have no access to that receivable right away, because the banks will typically only finance the receivable for anywhere between 60 and 90 days from the time that you start the work till the time that it should be paid out. And if they don't finance that, then the next thing you know, the entity, the restoration company, is going to sit back and say, how do I operate? Because I don't have any more money. I'm waiting for all this money to come in. And in this particular case, they're waiting for about $1.6 million in receivables from various insurance companies. And what we're doing is we're packaging a program together whereby they can take the receivables from these insurance companies and get it paid to them, usually within a couple of days of them submitting the invoice. rather than waiting for 6 months to get paid.
And then they can pay their guys.
Yeah, they can pay their guys and use their profit, and they still have some margins there down the road, and continue to grow their business.
Right. It's a fantastic program. You've given it. You're tweaking my brain to start looking into that a little bit more too.
It's it's really a no-brainer, because the easiest way that I promote that is when you're dealing with somebody who's self-employed, you get an idea how they feel for their businesses, and you find out what their receivables are. And if they're dealing with governments, if they're dealing with insurance companies, any of these blue chip companies, and it takes a while for them to receive money off of it, this is really a no-brainer for them, because it's just so natural, and they get their money quick.
That's awesome. And so we were chatting before we got on the air about just life and stuff. And so how do you balance running your mortgage practice and family? And you'd said that you were, a recovering workaholic, which I feel like I am sometimes. And so give me some advice on what you do there.
That's always been a challenge for me, because I am a bit of a workaholic. I'm a kind of person who doesn't need a lot of sleep, so I can usually get away with about 4 or 5 hours of sleep. And my wife yells at me because I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm at the office at 6, and I'm usually back home by 6. But over the years, because I've mentioned earlier, I was a deal junkie. I had to be involved with everything. Technology has evolved, and you know what my technology skills are like, so that's always going to be a challenge. But I have found that technology has stepped in to be able to make life a little bit easier for stuff that needs to take place on the weekends and the evenings, to the point where now I make it seasonally adjusted, so that during the summers I'm 4 days at the cottage, 3 days at work, but when I'm at work I'm working 12, 15 hours a day. But nobody else is around to bother me. But when I'm at the cottage, I'll work 3 or 4 hours in the morning on a Friday, 3 or 4 hours in the morning on a Monday, but I get to enjoy the true family time, because we'll go out on the beach or go on the boat or go out and do something and spend time with the family in that respect. The rest of the year outside the summer, the kids keep us very active with the different kinds of sports, and I've always made it a point to never miss any of their events unless I'm going to be out of town. So whether it's basketball, baseball, dancing, whatever the event, I'm always there, and I turn the phone off and I focus more so on what it is that we got to do there. Or even at nights, taking the dogs for walks, doing different things and spending time, true quality time. A lot of people will, in my opinion, misplace quantity time versus quality time, and the quality is the time that you spend with your family versus the amount of time you spend with your family. Sometimes people differ on that. I look at it where you can spend some time in a room with somebody for 3 or 4 hours and not talk, but you can spend an hour talking with them and get a lot more out of that relationship on the quality side versus the quantity time. So I always make it a point to spend a lot of time with my family. Mm-hmm. And I put family first before the work, as much as I am a bit of a work junkie.
Deal junkie, work junkie, it's all good. I agree with you on the quality time. It's all about focus and being there and not being on your phone, and just be there. When you're at the cottage, be at the cottage, and when you're at the basketball game, just be there, and when you're at work, be at work, and just head down and work, and don't mess around.
Definitely.
So now we're going to move to the rapid fire questions. You can answer these with a little shorter answers, and so I have a few more questions for you. So the first one is, what is the number one thing holding back most mortgage brokers from being successful?
The number one thing holding them back, I think it's their fear to become successful and give people the honest, or give them the true goods, as compared to just focusing on how much money they're going to make on a deal. Yeah.
So they're thinking about their own needs and not the person that they're trying to serve.
Exactly. I hear so many people say, I don't wake up to make $500. I don't wake up to make $1,000. Well, you know what? That $500 deal can translate into a $3,000 deal down the road. Just because you spent the time, whether it was 10 minutes or an hour or 2 hours, helping somebody out, because one day they're going to need that other one, or they know somebody who's going to be requiring that kind of information that you're prepared to give them.
And do you have like an internet resource or software or program that you use to make your business more successul?
Who, me?
Yeah, I know. I chuckled. Yeah, you have a computer in your office, right?
I've got a computer, and yes, and I've got the BlackBerry. No, I don't. You know what? I usually rely I'm a bit of a sponge when it comes time to listening what people have to say about the technology side, and I pass everything on to people who I believe know that and specialize in that. I've chosen not to understand and focus on a lot of the stuff on the technology, but I definitely do listen to what it is that people have to say about it and try and find different ways to incorporate it into my business. But is there anything special and in particular? No. Through Mortgage Architects, I know we just launched a new website, which for the most part has been an adaptation of a bunch of requests of people looking for different things to be able to make it work. Is it perfect? No, but can it accommodate the bulk of what it is that most people need to be able to make their job easier on a day-to-day basis? I believe so, yes, and it's only going to get better.
Right, yeah, they do have, there's definitely some good tools out there for brokers from different brokerages that, they try to make your job easier. So if you had one book you'd recommend, what would that be?
One of my favorite books that I read, it's not a big one, it's about 130 pages, is called Raving Fans by Ken Blanchard. And in essence, what it does, it's nice, simple reading. You could read it in a night quite easy, but it just takes you from what most people would view as regular expectation to bring yourself up to offering exceptional customer service. And there's really nothing special that they're doing other than what people should be doing on a day-to-day basis. It's showing people how to go that one extra step.
Right. Yeah, I've actually read it before. It is a good book. And
it is one.
So where do you think our industry's headed? Like, where's the opportunity right now in the next year? Where do you see it?
I see a lot more of the B business happening. I also see that in the broker business itself, people are going to have to start becoming more of an educator than they are a mortgage broker, for lack of a better term. The banks could put us out of business in a heartbeat if they wanted to, just given the parameters of how they operate. We have to show the individual consumer how it is that we will be meriting them if they decided they want to come along with us. And we can't, education isn't only about giving somebody the lowest rate, because sometimes the lowest rate is the worst deal that's out there. I just find that our industry has to start teaching people what to look for, what not to look for, what they should be focusing on, and taking a look at what's good for the consumer on a short-term basis and a long-term basis. We'll look to see what their goals and their needs are, knowing full well that stuff's going to change, and it is a moving target, but they have to pay attention to what's going to be the best in the best interest of the consumer. To me, that's where the industry is going to go, and if we follow that, it's going to be real interesting to see how much the business is going to grow. The other side of it is knowing products. You got to know what's going on. There's probably today well over 500 mortgage products available to consumers. But at the end of the day, it's how it's dressed and how it's flavored. You go to Royal Bank, they got 10 mortgage products. Well, okay, so that's 10 mortgage products. But how do they dress it? And if you know how each one dresses it, that's great. Learning about interest rate differential penalties, learning about the different kinds of programs that are out there from the B side, learning how, and I've always made a point of doing this, is when I go to different cities, I try and spend time in an underwriting office to learn how their workflow is, because once you start to learn how their workflow is and how they view underwriting a deal, you sure get a lot out of it, and you establish these relationships with underwriters that will give you a bit of an edge over other people. So those, to me, are going to be keys as far as building a successful operation and seeing what's going to happen down the road. And being a participant, don't sit back and wait for everything to come back to you.
Right, that's good. That's good advice. And then this is one of my favorite questions. So if you woke up tomorrow, you'd sold your business, you moved across the country to a place about the size of Winnipeg and with the same temperatures from, so maybe, I don't know where that would be, but somewhere that's just as cold. I will put you somewhere warm. You have none of your contacts. You've sold you can't talk to your old, you have contracts, you can't talk to your old clients. So and you wanted to build a mortgage business again, what would be the 3 things that you'd start doing to build your business?
One of the very first things I look at is to see what's going on in the market as far as advertising and who's doing what. And this goes back to when it is that I first got into the businesses. let's open the Yellow Pages and see who's doing what kind of things are being advertised. Typically, that's going to give you an idea as to what's going on. Once you've got that part of it, then you go to the next step. And again, this is the guy who's not the techie guy. Then you go and do your search on the internet to see what's being offered in an area that you're going to be moving into. Those are going to be the keys as to what competitors are doing, what they're really focusing in on, and with the knowledge that you've got in the background and you build on your strengths, that's going to tell you what it is you could be looking at or you should be focusing in on because it's missing in the market. Then the last part of that is getting in touch with a bunch of realtors and a bunch of financial planners and show them how it is that you're going to be able to provide value to their particular operations. Because more so, I mean, I've never built my business on a real estate, on realtors. I can count on one hand how many real estate agents I deal with. And that's probably been true since the day I started business. And that's been purely my choice. I can tell you quite honestly that I have missed out on a number of opportunities because of that choice, because I choose not to be at a real estate agent's beck and call at 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday night or 5 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday afternoon when I'm getting ready to have dinner with my family. There's no deal that's going to be that important that I have to do that. They'll all treat you the same. And that was just something that I found out way back when everything was a last minute thing. So I chose not to deal with them, but I did choose to deal with people who understand who I worked or how I worked and where it is that I was going to be focusing in on. So if they knew that if I told them that, yes, here's what the expectations are, I'd set the expectations. We've had some real funny markets here recently where we have bidding wars and people are going in unconditional, always dangerous. And you tell that to somebody and realtors would get upset with you, and I just tell them, you know what, this isn't how it is that I would have pre-approved a deal, and if you don't like it, I'm sorry, I can't help you or I can't help the customer on this. And I let the customers know that that's not how it is that I run a practice. But if you build that stable of realtors who understand how it is that you do business and what their expectations are going to be, and then you deal with financial planners, because one of my bigger strengths has been with financial planners, and I always try and build that part of it up, knowing full well that you're building that fence around their asset base. They're prepared to work with you. And that's what it is that I would recommend doing if I were to move up into a different market.
Somewhere warmer. And so I'm just going to recap that. So first thing is research. Second is find a gap in the market, something that you think, hey, there's a problem here that I could help solve. And then the third thing would be to network with local professionals and try to add value. So that you're like, hey, I can show you how I can help you build your business, but also set some parameters around it so that you're not, like you said, on their, on speed dial and they're phoning you at 11 o'clock at night and you're trying to chill out at the lake we can still do
this at the lake.
What's that?
Well, I can still do it at the lake because I do some work at the lake. It's just I'm not going to be doing it on Saturday night at 10 o'clock.
Right. Okay. So the last thing, this has been a fantastic interview. Thanks for taking us through where you've been and from deal junkie to AR, accounts receivable, financier, and all these other cool things that you're doing. Are you guys hiring right now?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So where can people find you online?
My website is mortgagewinnipeg.com. I've had that domain name for years and years. That's one way, or else just picking up the phone and phoning us in the Winnipeg Mortgage Architect's office in Winnipeg.
Okay, and also, for any of our listeners, if you go to ilovemortgagebrokering.com and you type in Denis, Denis, you'll be able to find this show in the show notes, and I'll have a link to the book and also a link to Denis's website so that you can connect with him if you are in that market. Anyways, any last piece of wisdom that you'd like to leave us with?
No, it's always a pleasure because I like learning some stuff off of you as well.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Denis.
Great. Thanks a lot, Scott.
Want to rock your mortgage business? Then crank up the volume with your host, Scott Peckford, on I Love Mortgage Brokering.
Hi, Broker Nation. If you enjoyed this interview, please take a minute, visit iTunes, and rate this podcast. If you do, you'll get 3 deals in the next month. Okay, that's not true, but I would really appreciate it. Also, I want to invite you to join me on a quest. After every episode, I personally take 5 minutes and think about one thing or one idea I can use to improve my mortgage business. I encourage you to do the same. Over the next 12 months, I plan to do 100 interviews and make 100 improvements. I'm going to track these to see how they impact my business and, more importantly, my bottom line. Visit ilovemortgagebrokering.com and post in the show notes what one thing you plan to do differently after listening to this interview, and check out what other brokers are sharing. Also, if you'd like to connect with me, fire me an email at scott@robyourbank.com. I love hearing from passionate mortgage professionals who are interested in improving their business. Until next time, rock on.